Madeira is one of the most fascinating islands in the Atlantic Ocean. Colonized in 1419 by the Portuguese navigator Gonçalves Zarco, Madeira forms an archipelago of islands, Porto Santo, Selvagens and Desertas. Despite being around 900 kilometers from the European continent and 500 from the African coast, the richness of Madeira's geological and natural attributes make it very special, and this is particularly related to its original formation. Actually, it is in natural history terms a recently formed island. Of volcanic origin, Madeira emerged from the ocean just a little over 60 million years ago. This is exactly the same age as the archipelagos of the Canaries, Cabo Verde and the Azores, which together with Madeira form Macaronesia. The lava, gases and other fluids that rose from the interior of the Earth's crust to the surface of the ocean gave form to the land and created high peaks, such as those of Ruivo and Arieiro, which rise to 1,800 meters above sea level. With the end of the volcanic activity, the island became covered in huge species of trees and bushes, which because of their isolation developed their own special characteristics, thus making them unique in the world. The vegetation covered the island so completely that when the first navigators arrived, the most obvious name that sprang to mind for the place was Madeira, the Portuguese word for wood. And people settled between the steep mountains and the deep valleys. To begin with, the settlers were Portuguese, but in more recent years they came from many different parts of Europe. With the passing of the years, the forest gave way to a more humanized landscape. Vitor Reinecke is passionately interested in these mountains. Although he had known them since birth, he had always loved the ocean and marine life, and it is only recently that he has rediscovered this undiscovered Madeira. Of German origin, Vitor has an unusual family background. His great-grandfather decided to emigrate with his son Erhard during the 1930s. The family had aristocratic roots and indulged in the hobby of watchmaking. Although they were not of Jewish blood, they did not take kindly to the rise of German Nazism. And when Hitler rose to power, they fled to Madeira to start a new life. Here they founded the German watchmakers of Funchal. Vitor's grandfather married a Madeiran girl who gave birth to his father, who 10 years ago opened a typical German beer house. Vitor has followed in the family footsteps, taking charge of the business. But in his free time he likes to climb up into the mountains. There he spends his time walking and observing the birds that soar in the air currents, such as the birds of prey and the wood pigeons. Then, when his nostalgia returns, he goes back to the sea, with friends, a custom of many years standing which transports him into a timeless world teeming with life. One of his favorite places is the Garajá Reserve, which the local government has had the intelligence to create as a total protection zone for marine resources and species. They didn't have to wait long for results, and now it is common knowledge that there has been a great increase in the population of fish that come here. And this is illustrated by the enormous shoals of barracuda and amberjacks, which are equally savage predators, but less threatening to man. At least myths have not been created about them. Close to the bottom, searching for its food in the volcanic sands, the stingray appears to fly. Its shape and method of locomotion must surely have served as a model for constructing that stealth fighter plane, the F-117. Often, Vitor dives alongside his friend Peter Wirtz, one of the foremost world authorities on the behavior of marine species, professor at the universities of Madeira and of the Azores, and also a collaborator in the Seven Seas series. Here in the reserve, the professor studies the symbiotic relationship between the anemones and the cleaner shrimps, and also the behavior patterns of the large groupers. The groupers are the largest fish to be seen in the Atlantic. They reach 1.6 meters in length and live for 40 or 50 years. Like the other members of their species, they change sex. They start off life as females, and when they reach 80 centimeters in length, they change into males. Being very gentle animals, which are capable of being tamed, accustomed to the presence of man, they became almost extinct because their flesh was very highly esteemed, and they were mercilessly massacred by underwater hunters who saw them as easy and lucrative prey. The Garajao Reserve was set up with the principal aim of protecting these animals, but after a few years it became evident that the success of the scheme had extended to other species of fish with equal increases in numbers. Having disappeared for 10 years, this so-called yellow grouper is actually a comb grouper, also grey in colour, but it has suffered as a result of a phenomenon called shantism, which consists in the natural elimination of cyan and magenta skin colorations, leaving the animal with this strange yellow pigmentation. From photographs, Peter Wirtz managed to identify it as being one and the same animal that had disappeared. He believes that all that had happened was that it had found new territory. The black-tailed coma is also of the same family, that of the Serranidae, but it rarely grows to more than 40 centimeters in length. Its eyes are iridescent, as can be seen when the light is at the right angle. These fish are hermaphrodite, that is, they produce both eggs and sperm, and when they mate, they have to decide which of the two is the male and which the female in an elaborate courting ritual. At Garajau live several pairs of red hogfish, Pseudolepi tablois scrofa. These fish have protuberant teeth, which are even more striking in the males, whose colour is also much stronger than that of the females. The latter are smaller and usually have yellow tails. In this species, the largest females in the area change sex at the end of their life cycle, just like the groupers. Perhaps because of their serpentine form, the moray eels are among the most feared of marine animals. But the ease with which Vitor approaches these mythical predators proves that, as always, it is the animals that fear the humans, and with good reason. Several different species exist in the archipelago, the most common being the black moray eel, the Murena augusti. Although this fang-toothed moray eel, Enchelicor anatina, with its glass-like teeth, appears even more aggressive than the others, it is actually much smaller, showing itself only because of fear at our approach. Its long, thin teeth are used to eat mollusks, such as octopuses and cuttlefish. In the intervals between dives, Vitor returns to the mountains where he has opened a little bar in the River Frio zone. It serves at the same time as a refuge for hikers and climbers and as a meeting place. In the last few years, nature holidays have been on the increase in Madeira. There are over 1,000 meters of levadas, the little man-made irrigation canals that cover the entire island, and these are now sought after by those who want to go on long hikes. By means of these paths, you can reach the depths of Madeira, where the water surges as if it had sprung from the flowers and the earth, from natural wells or from springs that emerge from between the rocks. The water reaches every corner of the island, giving life to the exuberant plant life. And if we venture along certain footpaths, we can encounter unique sylvan gardens, where the green blends with yellow, white and violet. When swimming in these caves, it is necessary to take special precautions. You should only dive in a group, which is well equipped with torches and ropes that serve to mark the route and help in orientation. The golden shrimp, Stenopus hispidus, is only active at night or in caves. It resembles the cleaner shrimp with its white feelers, but nobody has yet actually seen it perform this function. The unicorn shrimp, Parapandalus narval, is a shrimp that the Madeirans eat, catching it in nets at great depths. It's an example of animals that live in the deep at around 400 to 500 meters and close to the surface in caves. The sign and mark that we see is their eggs. The smaller animals are the males. Later on they change into females and grow larger. These red reef lobsters inhabit the Caribbean at the other side of the ocean, but they can also be found in San Tomé, Cabo Verde and the Canaries. Madeira is the most northerly extreme for the tropical species. Active at night, they can only be observed in caves or dark zones. The Atlantic dancing shrimp was so christened because of its characteristic movements. They can be found on both sides of the Atlantic. The lesser locust lobster is actually a smaller species of the greater locust lobster of Madeira and the Azores. This pretty ballet is performed by a feather starfish when it is exposed to the light. It lives in caves and under stones. Also in the darkness of the caves, we can see this unnamed species of black coral. When they least expect it, the divers can encounter bubbles of air in certain remote caves. It's always an opportunity to take a breather and at the same time save the air in the bottles. On the island of Madeira, the forests extend in all their natural splendor from the coast to the mountaintops. Among the huge number of botanical species, over 100 are endemic to the island, and many of these species are to be found in the Laura silva forest. The till, a tree with a large span used in shipbuilding. The aderno, rare these days because it was once much in demand for firewood. The vignatico, whose wood was used to make furniture and its bark for producing dyes. These are only a few of the trees that are to be found in the Laura silva forest, and which, because of the destruction they have suffered during the past 5 centuries, are now protected by law. Laura silva, a candidate for the Humanity Natural Heritage Award, is situated in the so-called mist zone, between 600 and 1200 meters above sea level. And according to scientists, it is a living vestige of the forest that during the Tertiary Age, 20 million years ago, extended from the south of Europe and from the Mediterranean. Vitor likes to wander over these hillsides to really appreciate the different shades of green, close to the ancient 100-year-old trunks and the rare trees which are in danger of extinction, following the old pathways and rediscovering paths that have fallen into disuse. The heavy precipitation that can be experienced above 800 meters is the main reason for the abundance of water and for the waterfalls that can be seen almost everywhere. The Laura silva is also a forest that depends for its survival on this humid, subtropical temperate climate. And only if this water continues to run through the rocks of the mountain will we be able to guarantee the preservation of what remains of the original forest. But even today, Vitor doesn't forget his passion for the sea, and he goes back down to dive in the waters of the now protected zones. It gives him pleasure to see that the number of fishes has increased with the prohibition of fishing and the protection provided by the park guards. It is a pity that Madeira is the only place in Portugal where such submarine nature reserves exist. Among the shoals of damselfish and Turkish wrasse with their vibrant colors, it is the bluefin damselfishes that mostly catch the eye due to their voracity and for the zeal in which they defend their territory. Their metallic blue fins are the parts that come out best on film because the rest of their body is jet black. They are members of the Pomacentridae family, which includes many species from warm and temperate seas. The best known of these are the anemone clownfish, which are very similar to the species that live in the Mediterranean Sea, but which have over the centuries adapted themselves into a separate variety. The sharp-nosed puffer also shares in the banquet, seizing on what remains of the feather starfish after the damselfish have had their fill. They are also tropical fish, which can be found in other, warmer parts of the globe. These can only be distinguished by their duller colorings. The two-banded bream, of several different species, in former times much persecuted by hunters, are now in abundance, thanks to the protection provided by the reserve. They can be quite aggressive when feeding. The large club-tipped anemone from the Telemectactis cricoides species can be found in Atlantic waters, especially in the Caribbean. In Madeira and the Canaries, the species is larger, reaching 20 centimeters in length. They can have various colors and over 20 different markings. The most common colors are pink, rusty yellow, red and white. Between its large finger-like tentacles, more than 20 species of crustaceans live in a state of symbiosis. Shrimps, such as the tiny humpbacked shrimp, Thor amboinensis, only 2 centimeters in length. They also exist on both sides of the Atlantic, and this is another of the cases where Madeira lies at the northern limit of the species. This is a fireworm, which has stinging cilia, and it is better to avoid contact with it. Apart from these colonies of little yellow sponges, at greater depths we can see large groups of black corals. They are even more widespread in tropical waters and in the warmer waters of the Caribbean on the other side of the Atlantic. They form vast submarine forests, usually at great depths, over 30 meters. They can also be found in caves and very sheltered spots, as we witnessed earlier. It's a favorite place for Peter Wirtz to carry out his researches. Here he has already discovered a little shrimp that is yet to be identified and which will almost certainly be given his name. Close to the place called Caniço de Baixo lies the western border of the Garajal Reserve, and 2 diving clubs are located here. It's a privileged spot because of the profusion and quantity of the species that benefit from the legislative protection. Right in the middle of an enormous shoal of cow bream, Vitor seems to disappear completely from sight. These fish, members of the bream family, are however vegetarian. Here we can also see large shoals of grunts, so called because when threatened they emit quite audible grunting noises which they make by grinding the teeth in their pharynxes. Greatly appreciated by gourmets are the striped mullet. Here we can observe very clearly the action of their whiskers, which they use like a tongue to sample the food they search for among the grains of sand. The butterfly rays are a tropical species whose wingspan can reach as much as 2 meters and who swim with extreme elegance. They have short tails like others of the same species. They are fish that, like dogfish and sharks, have gelatinous skeletons. In Madeira there exist several different species, from the rare and enormous mantas to the more common eagle and stingrays. The latter species possess poisonous barbs in their tails, which they discharge when attacked. They feed on bivalve mollusks such as mussels, which they sniff out on the sea bottom. Here we can find marbled electric rays, also called torpedoes. They are yet another variety that defend themselves from or stun their pursuers by emitting an electric current that can reach an intensity of 220 volts. In reality, each discharge consists of a series of 3 or 5 emissions, each of them lasting for less than 1/100th of a second. This characteristic is what has earned them their name. As the tail is the only zone not protected by this current, when it is attacked, there it tries to turn so that it can deliver a shock to its attacker. One of the strangest species in the region, Uranoscopus scaba, the stargazer, so named because of the position of its eyes, is almost always hidden in the sand, making it difficult to observe. The opercula of its gills are furnished with poisonous spines, so one has to take great care in handling it. It belongs to the same family as the less venomous weaver. This strange fish, called the cleaver wrasse, is distinguishable by its bright colouring and its restless behaviour. It lives close to the sandy bottom, into which it burrows when threatened. The grey triggerfish, peixe-porco in Portuguese meaning pigfish, is so called because it grunts just like that animal. Apart from its very bizarre appearance, it can seem almost aggressive in contact with divers. In actual fact, as it is extremely curious and intelligent, all it is doing is taking tiny exploratory nibbles at what appears to it as a huge animal dressed in a brightly coloured skin. It swims in a very individual manner, using its apparently uncoordinated dorsal fins in place of its tail. In certain zones where the voracious black sea urchins, a plague in these waters, are not prolific, we can also see the original algae, such as the sargassos, in which live clouds of what appear to be little fish, but are actually tiny crustaceans. They serve as food for many fish, such as the Madeira scorpionfish, Scorpena madeirensis. It doesn't only exist in these islands, but also in the Azores, the Canaries, and along the Senegal coast. It possesses the typical venomous dorsal spines that gave it its name and cause pain when they are touched by mistake. Here we can also see the Atlantic wrasse. During its mating season, the males like this one display more garish colourings. Among the tentacles of another giant anemone, this time golden in hue, lives the red-banded cleaner shrimp, Lismata grabhami, which is dedicated to cleaning the parasites from the fish and moray eels with its white pincers, hence its name. It's always to be found in pairs, but it is actually a hermaphrodite species which mutually fertilizes itself. These fish can live equally well in rock fissures where their customers seek them out to be deloused. The arrow crabs only present a threatening appearance to us because we associate them with spiders, their terrestrial equivalent. They are especially active at night. The span of their claws can reach 20 centimeters. The hermit crab is also quite common. It owes its name to the shell it uses for protection, inserting the soft part of its abdomen into an abandoned shell. As the body grows, it repeatedly exchanges its shell home for a larger one. Another, smaller species can live in holes in the rock or abandoned barnacles. The parrotfish live in warm seas all over the world, feeding on coral and algae that it gnaws with its ponderous jaws. This species, Parasoma cretense, has the characteristic of being the only one in which the male, being grey, is less visible than the red and bright yellow female. During the night, the submarine landscape appears transformed, and night diving can be very interesting, particularly in the Atlantic, because some of the fish that are active during the day are asleep and almost allow themselves to be touched, while other species take advantage of the darkness to hunt, emerging from their daytime hiding places. The wide-eyed flounder Bothus podus belongs to the flounder family, who seek their food and shelter on the sandy sea bottom. The red-combed starfish we see here conceals itself in the sand when threatened. It feeds on dog whelks and cowries. This big-eye conger is a fine example of a fish that is only active at night. During the day, it lies hidden in the sand, where it buries itself when threatened. most interesting characteristic of this cuttlefish is its eyes, which are very similar to those of the superior vertebrates such as man. In these waters of the archipelago, there exist several species of mollusk, such as cuttlefish, squid, and octopus. The latter have become somewhat rare as a result of indiscriminate hunting. They employ all the different methods of mimicry, being able to change color and shape when threatened. They belong to the cephaloides group, animals that possess a high intelligence. The spiny spider crab utilizes the spikes of its shell for camouflage by employing its rear limbs to secure pieces of sponge and algae on them. They are greatly appreciated as a table delicacy, which does not lead for an easy life. The seahorses, among the most elegant and threatened of fish, can be found in every sea, but are very difficult to spot because of their clever camouflage and their timidity. The most curious characteristic of these animals is the fact that the female deposits her eggs in an abdominal cavity of the male, and it is from there that the young eventually emerge. This species, which appears not to possess a head, is the bumblebee shrimp, Ganatophyllum elegans. Its name refers to its resemblance to that species of bee. Attached to the rocks, we can find tiny white animals, the light bulb tunicates. They feed by filtering microorganisms from the water. In order to film them, we used special high-magnitude macro lenses, as they are only 3 millimeters in length. This red lip blenny is the most common representative of the blenny family. These fish live close to the surface in little cavities in the rock. Those who long for wide and welcoming sandy beaches have to abandon Madeira and head for Porto Santo, another island of the archipelago. Only a 15-minute flight or a 2-hour boat journey away can be found another Atlantic paradise with 9 kilometers of golden sands. Here the ocean is very welcoming. The beaches are gently washed by the waves and the landscape is exuberant, captivating the most demanding of visitors. These are, and it's worth remembering this, the beaches that Christopher Columbus, the discoverer of America, actually walked on. The navigator married Filipa Moniz Perestrello, the daughter of the island's fief, and it was here that he began to consider the feasibility of circumnavigating the globe. Today, Porto Santo is one of the most popular destinations for those tourists who enjoy invigorating bathes in the sea. Warm waters that make them forget the anxieties of modern life and transport them, as if by enchantment, into a more natural world. But the tourism demand has its drawbacks. Perhaps, therefore, the submarine life is less exuberant here than in Madeira, where the fish and other marine life is rigorously protected. Vitor runs another restaurant here, and it is here that he seeks a counterpoint to the stress of the real world. Here the large anemones can appear in other colors, such as black and white. This larger forkbeard is more common in the Azores and very much appreciated at the table. In such a cavity, we find a group of cardinal fish. The animals with the puffed-out mouths are the males, and it is in these that the females deposit their eggs to hatch. The greater locust lobsters were once very common in the archipelago. Their flesh is highly appreciated, and they were therefore caught in such quantities that they are nowadays quite rare. This has led to the creation of a period of protection in the summer when the species reproduces. These are the unknown flowers of the true Garden of Madeira. Flowers that were not planted by men, but which it has fallen to men to preserve.